Pause and rest, for God is moving on your behalf. You don't need to see it, touch it, or figure it out. You only need to believe. That heaviness in your chest, that prayer still waiting for an answer, that mountain standing unmoved, it is not the end. It isn't even the halfway point. It is the quiet moment right before the breakthrough. When your strength runs dry, when your plans unravel, when your spirit grows tired, that is the moment God begins to move in the unseen. Don't be deceived by silence. Don't be unsettled by delay. Don't confuse your pain with His absence. God has not turned away. God is not disciplining you. God is preparing and positioning you. Too often we take on burdens never meant for us. We wear ourselves out trying to fix what only God has the power to resolve. We step into battles armed with human effort, forgetting that God never called us to be the warrior, only the believer. We drain our energy striving to prove, to mend, to force outcomes. But hear this: after you've done all, prayed, obeyed, stood firm, and trusted, God whispers, "Rest. Now I am at work." There is power in rest. Not the kind of rest that comes from comfort, but the sacred rest that comes from trust. The kind of rest that says, even though I walk through the valley of shadows, I will not be afraid, for God walks with me. The kind of rest that says, though the fig tree does not blossom, though there be no fruit on the vine, still I will wait, for God is faithful. This kind of rest is not sleep. It is not idleness. It is not surrender to defeat. It is spiritual confidence. It is knowing that the hand of God never trembles. It is knowing that while you are still, God is active. While you wait, God is at work. God is not intimidated by your enemies. God is not confused by your circumstances. God is not limited by your resources, and God is not late. Every season of delay is part of a holy strategy. Every closed door is protection. Every detour is divine instruction. If only you could see what God is arranging behind the scenes, you would stop worrying this very moment. If you knew what traps God has dismantled on your behalf, you would fall on your knees in worship. But because you can't see it yet, you grow restless. You feel like nothing's happening. You start questioning the timing, the process, even the promise. But hear me now, God is never inactive. You may be standing still, but God is not. When you sleep, God does not. When you weep, God collects every tear. When you feel forgotten, God is crafting the next chapter. You are not abandoned. You are not overlooked. You are in the hands of the Almighty. What more secure place could you possibly be? We are a people obsessed with outcomes. We want to know what's next, how it will happen, and when. But God is a God of process. And sometimes the greatest test is not the challenge, it's the waiting. It's the not knowing. It's the silence that demands faith. Resting while God works means releasing your need to control. It means surrendering your obsession with answers. It means choosing to trust even when everything in you screams for certainty. You see, real trust isn't proven when things are going your way. It's proven when nothing makes sense. It's forged in darkness, in confusion, in the wilderness. That's when God looks at you and says, "Now I see your faith." That's when the heavens open, not because you fought harder, but because you rested deeper. When God works, He works completely. He doesn't patch things up. He rebuilds from the foundation. He doesn't answer your prayer halfway. He gives you more than you ask for, but He does it in His time, not yours. in His way, not yours. And your role is not to understand the how, but to stand firm in the who. Who is in charge? Who made the promise? Who never fails? The moment you rest is the moment God begins to move faster. But we fight that rest. We fight it because we think rest means giving up. But in the kingdom of God, rest is warfare. Rest is resistance against the panic of the world. Rest is a declaration that says, I trust God more than my logic. I trust God more than my bank account. I trust God more than the news. I trust God more than my own. Understand there is a sacred rhythm to life, and God moves according to divine timing, not rushed, not delayed, perfect. And when God works, He works through ways you couldn't predict even if you tried. He will use people you never met. He will open doors you didn't knock on. He will create rivers in deserts, light in the deepest valley, and peace in the midst of your storm. But He'll do it while you rest. You may think resting is doing nothing, but it's not. Resting in God is an act of defiance against fear. It's standing still while chaos demands you move. It's saying, I will not panic. I will not break. I will not give up, because my trust is not in the visible. My hope is not in the seen. My strength is not in the flesh. My confidence is in God. How many times have you prayed and then taken the problem back into your own hands? How many times have you surrendered your burden only to carry it again 5 minutes later today? Stop. Stop running. Stop calculating. Stop overthinking. Stop doubting. Rest now, because God is doing what only God can do. When you rest, you give God room to work. You clear the clutter of your mind. You make space for divine solutions. When you rest, you're not giving up on the dream. You're giving God permission to build it His way. You're saying, God, I trust you more than the work of my own hands. And God honors that kind of faith, that silent, still, unwavering belief in His plan. He sees you holding on when everything says let go. He sees you staying the course when quitting would be easier. He sees you worshiping through tears. That's what moves the heart of God. Not your perfection, but your perseverance. There are angels dispatched on your behalf right now. There are answers on the way. There are doors preparing to open. But you must be still. You must remain calm. You must resist the urge to manipulate the outcome. If you interfere with the process, you may delay the promise. But if you wait on God, you will see miracles unfold before your very eyes. When God works, He aligns everything. Not just the blessing, but your heart. Not just the breakthrough, but your mindset. Not just the provision, but your purpose. God is not just preparing it for you, He's preparing you for it. And sometimes the delay is not because the blessing isn't ready, it's because you aren't ready. And God loves you too much to give you something that will destroy you. So rest now. Rest because you've prayed. Rest because you've obeyed. Rest because God heard you. Rest because you are not alone. Rest because the storm is not your enemy, it's your training ground. Rest because the waiting is not empty, it's sacred. Rest because your future is already written. Rest because God is in control. The enemy wants you tired. He wants you anxious. He wants you to feel abandoned. But God says, "Come to me and I will give you rest." Not the rest of escape, but the rest of endurance. Not the rest of denial, but the rest of faith. The kind of rest that says, "I know who holds my future. I know who fights for me. I know who works all things together for my good." So lay down your fear, Lay down your questions. Lay down your timelines. Lay down your worry. Lay down your assumptions. Lay down your urgency. And take up faith. Take up trust. Take up patience. Take up expectation. Take up hope. Because while you rest, God is moving mountains. While you rest, God is sending provision. While you rest, God is answering prayers you forgot you even prayed. You're not forgotten. You're not forsaken. You're not stuck. You're right where you need to be in the arms of the Almighty, in the palm of His hand, under His watchful eye, covered by His mercy, surrounded by His grace, and guided by His wisdom. So rest now. Rest fully. Rest deeply. Because when you open your eyes again, everything will have changed. You'll see that the pain had a purpose, the delay was divine, the silence was sacred, and the waiting was worth it. You'll realize that while you were still, God was moving heaven and earth for your good. You'll understand that when you stopped striving, God started building. When you stopped pushing, God started providing. When you stopped panicking, God started preparing. This is the season where God is working while you wait. So don't rush it, don't fight it, don't question it, embrace it, rest in it, trust in it, because God never sleeps, never stumbles, never slips. He is orchestrating, organizing, and overseeing every detail of your destiny, and His timing is flawless. When you place your trust in God and choose to rest, you're not stepping away from action, you're stepping into divine alignment. This is where power lives. This is where clarity forms. This is where the fire of purpose gets reignited. Too many of you are trying to carry what God already lifted. You pace the floor at night, not realizing that the courtroom of heaven has already ruled in your favor. Whether you panic over bills, over relationships, over sickness, not knowing that God has already gone before you and made a way where there was none. But here's the truth. If your heart is not still, you will miss the whisper of direction. You will miss the hand of God working through the quiet. There is a holy stillness that comes only from trusting God completely. That stillness is not passive, it's powerful. It doesn't mean you stop moving in obedience. It means you stop forcing what God has not released. It means you stop trying to open doors God has locked for your protection. It means you stop clinging to people God has removed from your life. That kind of rest is a spiritual declaration. I am not my own provider, not my own protector, not my own savior. God is all of that and more. Look around you. Everything in this world is shouting, hurry, strive, achieve. But the voice of God says, be still and know. Be still and know. Not guess, not assume, not wish. Know that God is in control. Know that every detail of your life is under divine supervision. Know that no tear you've shed is wasted, no sacrifice you've made is forgotten, and no pain you've endured is meaningless. God is not idle. God is intentional. You see, rest doesn't mean escape. It doesn't mean pretending the pain isn't real. It doesn't mean turning your back on the storm. It means standing in the storm with peace in your heart because you know who commands the wind. Rest means refusing to let the noise of your surroundings drown out the truth of God's promise. It means hearing a negative report and still saying, God is working. It means watching the clock tick without fear, because God doesn't work by human deadline. Many people pray for breakthrough. but never rest long enough to receive it. You want an answer, but your soul is too restless to hear it. You want a miracle, but you won't wait long enough to witness it. And God is saying, stop moving, stop worrying, stop fighting me, rest, and let me show you what I can do. God does not need your anxiety. He does not require your panic to operate in power. What God desires is your surrender. Heart-deep, soul-anchored, fear-fying surrender. The kind of surrender that says, even if I don't see the path, I trust the hand that guides me. That is what brings peace in the middle of pressure. That is what brings strength when your own strength is gone. That is where rest becomes revelation. That is where faith begins to breathe. Don't confuse rest with complacency. Rest is a spiritual posture. It is you saying to the unseen world, I trust God more than I trust my senses. That's when everything changes. That's when the heavens begin to open. That's when provision meets preparation. That's when the answer comes. Not because you figured it out, but because you rested in faith and allowed God to show Himself strong. And hear this. The greatest attacks often come right before the greatest breakthroughs. The weariness you feel isn't a sign that God has left. It's a sign that something is shifting in the Spirit. The enemy cannot stop what God has ordained, so he tries to exhaust you into forfeiting it. But today you take your ground back through rest. You don't need to shout louder. You don't need to strive harder. You need to stand still and believe deeper. You need to wrap your soul in stillness and say, God, I am here and I trust you. I don't need all the answers. I just need to stay near to you. There is more happening in your life than what you can see. What looks like delay is actually divine design. What feels like emptiness is sacred preparation. God is not a God of chaos. He is not random. He is not surprised by your circumstances. Long before you felt the pressure, God crafted the solution. Long before you walked into the wilderness, God placed an oasis in the path. And long before the trial, God wrote your victory. So when your thoughts race, when fear tries to strangle your faith, when everything around you looks like it's falling apart, speak to your soul and say, rest. God is working. Not only is God working, He is working all things together for your good. Even the things that hurt, even the things that confused you, even the doors that shut and the people who left. Nothing escapes the reach of God. Not the betrayal, not the sickness, not the delay, not the failure, nothing. God can use broken pieces and make a masterpiece. God can take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it into your testimony. God can allow you to walk through fire and come out without a trace of smoke. But first, you must rest in that truth, because when you rest, God reveals. When you rest, God realigns your perspective, so that what once scared you now strengthens you. You can't build a future on anxiety. You can't hear divine direction in the noise of fear. You can't receive peace when your spirit is filled with panic. So lay it down. Every worry, every plan, every deadline, every disappointment, and say, God, I give this to you. Say it with your lips. Say it with your actions. Say it with your silence. Let your rest be your offering. Let your stillness be your worship. Let your trust be your testimony. And watch what God does. Watch how doors open that you never expected. Watch how strength rises when you should have fainted. Watch how peace guards your heart when others collapse. Watch how God takes your rest and turns it into results. You may feel weak right now. You may feel forgotten. But weakness is the platform for God's strength. Emptiness is the vessel He fills. Confusion is the canvas He paints miracles on. And when you feel you have nothing left, that's when God says, now I can show you who I am. Resting in God is not defeat, it's deliverance. It's the choice to stop living by sight and start living by faith. It's the deep sacred courage to say, God, I don't see the way, but I trust you to lead. I don't understand the delay, but I trust your plan. I don't feel strong, but I trust your strength. That is where miracles happen. That is where healing begins. That is where restoration is birthed. There are moments in your life when you feel like everything is falling apart. You look around and wonder, where is God in all of this? The silence feels heavy. The days feel longer. The nights echo with your questions. But do not be deceived by how things appear. God's silence is not absence. God's stillness is not neglect. God's delay is not denial. In fact, it is in the quietest moments that God often does His deepest work. You may not notice the shift beneath your feet, yet underneath it all, God is establishing deep roots of strength, flowing streams of wisdom, and unshakable foundations of purpose. A seed must first grow in hidden darkness before it ever pierces the surface. And so it is with you. God is under no obligation to reveal every detail of your path. He does not owe you a preview of each step before you take it. What He asked for is trust, not half-hearted trust, not trust with conditions, but a surrendered trust that declares, even when I cannot see, I will walk in peace because I know God is guiding me. That kind of faith delights the heart of God. That kind of rest attracts His favor. That kind of obedience opens the door to blessings you never dared to dream of. At times, God will strip away your own strength, not to break you, but to remind you that His power is always enough. Sometimes God allows you to feel the weight of waiting so that your heart detaches from the world and anchors itself fully in Him. And when that happens, when your soul stops depending on the external and begins relying solely on the eternal, that is when peace flows. That is when clarity comes. That is when purpose ignites, not because your situation changed, but because your spirit aligned with God. You must learn to stop running from discomfort. Stop cursing the wilderness. Stop fearing the unknown, because it is in those places, those sacred, silent, often painful places, that God reveals who you are and what He has planned for you. You're not being punished, you're being purified. You're not being rejected, you're being redirected. You're not being overlooked, you're being overhauled. And God is doing it all while you wait, while you rest, while you surrender. Rest is not laziness, rest is warfare. Rest says to the enemy, I will not be moved by what I see. I will not be shaken by delay. I will not be deceived by fear. I will stand still and know that my God reigns. That kind of rest carries the sound of victory. That kind of rest is louder than shouting, stronger than striving, deeper than desperation. It is the unshakable, anchored belief that God's Word is true, His plan is perfect, and His timing is never wrong. When God says He is working, He means every word. Not a single detail escapes His gaze. Not a single moment is wasted. What you call confusion, God calls construction. What you call delay, God calls development. And while you may feel like you're in a holding pattern, God is orchestrating a divine sequence of events that will unfold in perfect harmony. You are not stuck. You are not forgotten. You are being shaped. Rest now, not because you've done everything right, but because God's mercy covers you even when you fail. Rest now, not because the future is clear, but because the one who holds it is trustworthy. Rest now, not because you don't care, but because you care enough to let God take the lead. You are not created to carry burdens that only God can bear. You are not designed to figure it all out on your own. You were made to walk with God, to depend on Him, to rest in His promises even when the storm rages. And make no mistake, there will be storms. There will be moments when it seems like the wind is against you, the waves are too high, and the sky too dark. But even in that darkness, God is present. Even in the chaos, God is in control. Rest does not remove the storm, it changes how you face it. Rest allows you to walk through it without fear, knowing that God is with you. That even if the storm takes everything around you, it cannot take what God has placed within you. Some of you have been praying for change, but you're still clinging to old patterns. You've been crying out for breakthrough, but you refuse to release your grip on what's familiar. Let go. Let God handle what you cannot. Release the outcome. Release the need to be in control. Release the fear that if you rest, things will fall apart. Rest is not surrendering to defeat, it's surrendering to divine strength. When you rest in God, you are making room for miracles. Do not underestimate the value of hidden seasons. These are the seasons where God hides you, not to punish, but to prepare. Where He keeps you behind the scenes, not to forget you, but to strengthen you. He keeps you in waiting, not to waste your time, but to reveal His time. What you call delay is a divine detour around destruction. What you call loneliness is a sacred invitation to intimacy with God. What you call failure is simply the falling away of things that could not go with you into the next chapter of your life. But the moment you stop fighting the process is the moment you begin to see the hand of God more clearly. Your rest becomes revelation. Your silence becomes strength. Your patience becomes power. When you stop trying to force doors open, God opens them without effort. When you stop manipulating outcomes, God makes the path straight before you. When you stop panicking and start praying, God speaks peace into your chaos. So do not measure God's movement by your feelings. Do not mistake inactivity for ineffectiveness. God is not obligated to show you His methods. He is only asking you to trust His intentions, and His intentions are always good, always wise, always perfect. What you see as a pause, God sees as preparation. What you feel as pressure, God uses for purpose. And though your heart may be tired, your mind clouded, your body weak, your spirit, if anchored in God, can remain unshaken. Rest is not a break from faith, it is the proof of faith. It is saying, I believe God is moving even when I do not see it. I believe God is faithful even when I do not feel it. I believe God is faithful even when the evidence is lacking. This kind of rest defies logic. It confuses the world. It silences the accuser. Because while others panic, you have peace. While others give up, you stand firm. While others run in every direction, you wait in stillness. That is the mark of someone who knows their God. Let the world chase answers. Let others chase status, control, applause, validation. But as for you, rest. Let them wonder why you are so calm in the storm. Let them ask how you are still smiling when all seems lost. And when they ask, you tell them, it's not because I have it all figured out, it's because God is working, and I trust Him more than I trust my circumstances. When your soul finally chooses to rest, truly rest in the presence and power of God, that is when your spiritual eyes begin to open. You begin to see that what you once thought was delay was actually divine design. What you thought was rejection was really protection. What you assumed was the end was only the beginning of something far greater than you had planned. And all of it was being orchestrated by God while you wrestled, while you cried, while you questioned, while you waited. He was never far, He was never idle, He was never late. Resting in God is not a passive state, it is a posture of power. It means your heart is so rooted in trust that fear cannot take hold. It means your mind is so surrendered that overthinking has no room to grow. It means your spirit is so aligned with God that the noise of the world cannot shake your peace. Resting is not weakness, it is spiritual strength at its highest. Because anyone can fight, anyone can panic, anyone can try to take control. But it takes faith to be still. It takes courage to wait. It takes devotion to trust the unseen hand of God when all you have is a whisper of His promise. There is a deeper rest than physical sleep, and that rest only comes when you release the weight of your own will. As long as you are clinging to how you want things to go, how you think it should unfold, how you expect it to happen, you will be restless. But when you say, God, I release the outcome, you are stepping into divine rest. It is not a surrender to fate, it is an alignment with destiny. The destiny God already wrote for you before you took your first breath. There is a reason God calls His people to stillness before He moves. He does not rush transformation. He prepares it. He sets things in order. He examines the heart. He removes distractions. He breaks strongholds. And often the waiting is not because God is not ready, it is because you are being prepared. God is doing something inside you before He releases what is outside of you. The maturity you gain in waiting will be the wisdom you need when the door finally opens. So don't just wait, grow while you wait. Strengthen while you rest. Listen while you are still. You may feel like nothing is changing, but rest assured, God is never still without purpose. Every moment of silence is filled with intention. God uses the quiet to mold your character. God uses the pause to test your patience. God uses the unanswered moments to deepen your dependence. And that is the kind of faith God honors. Not shallow belief, not conditional trust, but a deep, unwavering confidence that rests in His sovereignty even when life feels uncertain. Rest means letting go of timelines. Rest means refusing to compare your journey with anyone else's. Rest means no longer forcing the pieces to fit where God has said not yet. And when you rest in God, you give Him room to do what only He can do. You step back from the driver's seat and say, lead me, guide me, show me. And you mean it. Not just with words, but with your silence, with your stillness, with your surrender. There is something sacred about waiting on God. It refines you, it breaks pride. It reveals what your faith is really made of. It exposes the noise you've mistaken for guidance. And when all else is stripped away, when your plans have failed, when your resources run dry, when your strength is gone, then you realize what has always been true. God alone is enough. That revelation is the beginning of real rest. Because when you know that God is enough, you stop striving to prove yourself. You stop panicking when the outcome is unclear. You stop living in fear of what might happen, and you start living in the peace of what God has promised. The greatest breakthroughs are often birthed from the greatest stillness. Not when you're shouting for attention, but when you're resting in quiet confidence. Not when you're striving to be seen, but when you're trusting that God sees you already. Not when you're forcing a door open, but when you're waiting for God to open the right one. Because a door you force open may bring temporary satisfaction, but it will lack divine stability. But a door God opens cannot be closed by man. It comes with His timing, His favor, His protection, and His provision. So trust in the wisdom of God. Trust that what He withholds for a reason. Trust that if something is not happening yet, there is something you cannot yet see. And perhaps, just perhaps, what's being worked out in the silence is greater than what you would have settled for in the noise. Rest not because your situation is easy, but because your God is mighty. Rest not because the answer is visible, but because the answer is in the hands of the one who sees the end from the beginning. There is a sacred authority that rises in the heart of a person who has truly learned to rest in God. That rest is not merely about stepping away from action, it is stepping into divine order. It is knowing that chaos does not control your destiny, God does. When your soul reaches that holy stillness, a fire begins to burn that no storm can put out. You no longer flinch at sudden bad news. You no longer stagger under pressure. You no longer chase after things that do not carry the seal of God. Instead, you walk with purpose, speak with wisdom, and live with peace, because you know your life is under the sovereign care of the Almighty. And what does it mean to live under that care? It means you stop looking for signs to feel safe. It means your faith is not based on feelings, but on the unshakable truth that God is always working, always watching, always guiding. You stop second-guessing every twist and turn, and you begin to realize that even when you cannot see it, God's hand is moving through every detail. He is in the slow moments. He is in the closed doors. He is in the waiting. He is even in the pain. Because God wastes nothing. What you thought would break you is the very thing He will use to bless you. Let me tell you this with a voice of fire and conviction. When you rest in God, you take the position of spiritual maturity. That is not weakness, that is mastery. A child panics when things don't go their way. A child demands immediate answers. But the mature soul says, I may not understand this now, but I trust the one who does. And that, my friend, is the highest form of strength, when your peace does not depend on your situation, but stands firm in your revelation of who God is. Rest is not for the passive, it is for the powerful. It is for those who have walked through the fire and chosen to trust God anyway. It is for those who have heard 100 lies in their mind, but still choose to believe the truth in their spirit. It is for those who have watched people walk away, opportunities disappear, plans fail, but have not let bitterness take root in their heart. It is for the ones who say, I don't need to prove anything because God is proving Himself through me every single day. And how does God prove Himself? Not always with thunder, not always with lightning, not always with dramatic miracles in the open. Sometimes He proves Himself in the quiet, in the way you survived what was meant to destroy you, in the peace that makes no sense to those watching, in the way your steps are ordered without you even knowing how. God proves Himself through your endurance, your resilience, your quiet obedience, your unseen prayers, your unwavering rest. There's a deep holiness in choosing rest when everything inside you wants to act of fear. The world will tell you to hustle harder, move faster, fix it yourself. But God says, wait on me. I am building something in you first. And when you honor that, when you wait without complaining, when you rest without doubting, you become dangerous to the enemy. Because a person who trusts God cannot be manipulated by fear. A person who rests in God cannot be controlled by chaos. Do not underestimate the value of what you're going through right now. God is refining your vision. He is stretching your faith. He is stripping away false dependencies. He is removing idols you didn't even realize you had. He is making you into someone who no longer needs external validation because you've learned to rest in divine approval. He is growing your roots so deep that when the winds blow, you will not be moved. And understand this, not every delay is meant to frustrate you. Some delays are divine shields. What you thought you needed may have been a trap. What you begged for might have broken you. What you envied in someone else's life might have destroyed you had it come to you prematurely. But because you rested, because you did not force what was not sent by God, you are protected, you are preserved, you're in position. Let the world call it foolishness, but you call it faith. The same way a farmer does not dig up the seed every day to check its progress, so too must you trust that what God planted in you will come to pass. You don't have to understand the how. You don't have to control the when. You only have to rest in the who. Who is in charge? Who is your provider? Who sees all and knows all and never makes mistakes? So lift your eyes, wipe your tears, quiet your heart, not because the problem disappeared, but because the problem no longer controls your peace. You have handed it over to the only one who knows the end from the beginning. You have released your will into the will of the one who cannot fail. And when you do that, truly do that, you will feel a peace that cannot be explained by logic or reason. It's a peace that says, come what may, I am held, I am guided, I am watched over. Some of you are in a season where you feel like nothing is changing. You pray, but the heavens feel silent. You move forward, but every door seems shut. You give your best, but no fruit appears. Listen to me now. This is not punishment. This is preparation. God is not ignoring you. He is refining you. He is teaching you to hear the quiet nudge, to move with the wind of wisdom, to discern the difference between noise and truth. If God allowed everything you wanted to come when you wanted it, you would be unprepared. You would be overwhelmed. You would mishandle the very thing He meant to bless you. So instead, He makes you wait. He says, rest. Let me shape your character before I elevate your calling. Let me build your faith before I bring the harvest. Let me clear the distractions before I reveal the next step. And when you've waited, when you've rested, when you've trusted, even when it didn't make sense, then comes the breakthrough. Not the kind the world gives, not something fleeting or shallow, but a breakthrough that runs deep, a peace that lasts, a joy that's unshaken, a victory that glorifies God alone. Rest is not something you earn. It is a gift from God. But you must be willing to receive it. You must be willing to release the weight. You must be willing to say, enough striving, enough stress, Enough trying to do God's job for Him. He does not need your fear. He needs your faith. He does not need your control. He needs your surrender. So tonight, when your thoughts begin to race, when the questions come back, when doubt tries to grip your soul, you speak these words: God is working. I don't need to know how. I don't need to see when. I just need to trust who. That is rest. That is power. That is your calling. And if you can hold on to that, if you can root yourself in that kind of trust, nothing can stop what God has prepared for you. Because you will not be led by emotion. You will not be thrown off course by delay. You will not settle for what is easy when God is preparing what is eternal. You will walk with peace. You will speak with wisdom. You will wait with purpose. And you will rest, not because the journey is over, but because the one guiding you is faithful. You will not be called upon to do the good work, but because the one guiding you is faithful. Rest now. Let your spirit find stillness in the truth that God is not done. Not with your life, not with your calling, not with your future. He is working even now in ways you cannot see, in places you do not know, behind doors you never expected. And when the time is right, He will reveal what He has been building all along. Until then, rest. God is working in your life. So now, in the quiet of your soul, I call you to rise, not in the way the world teaches, but in the way God commands. Rise in faith. Rise in trust. Rise in rest. Look at your life with honest eyes. Look at the burdens you've been carrying, the fears that have wrapped themselves around your mind, the wounds you've tried to hide. And now ask yourself this: have I truly placed it all in God's hands? Or have I been holding on, trying to control what only God can redeem? This is your moment to let go of every weight, every lie, every shadow of doubt that has kept your heart restless. Stop running from the silence. Stop fearing the stillness, for it is in that stillness that God whispers the loudest. It is in that silence that God does His deepest healing, and it is in that rest that your spirit will finally breathe. You were not created to walk alone. You were not created to fight every battle in your own strength. God has always been there. In every tear you've cried behind closed doors. In every battle you didn't have the words to pray for. In every silent night where you questioned your worth, God was working. And He's still working. Not because you've done everything right, but because His mercy is greater than your mistake. His power is greater than your weakness. His wisdom is deeper than your confusion. Let this be the turning point where your heart returns fully to God. Let this be the hour where your soul no longer looks to the world for peace, but to God alone. Build your days on truth. Guard your thoughts with discipline. Align your steps with obedience. And above all, rest in the knowledge that God is not finished with you. The process is not proof of absence. It is the evidence of divine intention. The wait is not wasted. The pain is not pointless. The silence is not abandonment. You are being shaped for something greater, something eternal, something that glorifies God through every breath you take. So walk forward, not in anxiety, but in assurance. Lay your head down at night, not in fear, but in faith. Speak to your future, not with trembling lips, but with bold confidence. God is with me. God is guiding me. God is working in me. When the weight of each day feels unbearable, when the nights seem endless, when answers remain hidden and the path ahead is clouded, don't flee, don't force it, don't crumble beneath the load. Instead, pause, be still, draw a deep breath, fix your eyes on the God you serve. The one who stretched out the heavens has never abandoned what he made. The one who split the sea and hushed the storm has never turned away from a weary cry. The author of your story has already penned the final chapter, and it is filled with goodness. So move forward, not with trembling, but with courage, not with hesitation, but with clarity, not with fear, but with praise. Let your life reveal that to rest in God is not frailty, it is strength, it is faith, it is surrender, and it is the very place where triumph begins. Rest today, not because all is well, but because God is flawless, and His hand is at work in your life, always, faithfully, unfailingly, eternally. There comes a moment in every life when silence speaks louder than any words. When those you believed would stand by you forever suddenly disappear. When the hands that once lifted you now push you aside. When voices that felt so close fade into distance, and places that once gave comfort now feel empty. And you begin to ask yourself why. Why did they leave? Why did they change? Why did they betray me? Why did the very ones I loved most walk away right at the edge of my breakthrough? Let me speak a truth to you, one you must never forget. God removed them because your blessing was near. Hear me, my friend. This is not a loss. This is not rejection. This is divine protection. This is not abandonment. This is alignment. God knows what you don't know. God sees what you cannot see. And when the time comes for your elevation, for your anointing, for your breakthrough, God removes every weight that cannot fly with you. There are people who are only assigned to your struggle, not your success. They were meant to be part of your process, not your promise. And God, in His wisdom and in His timing, said, "No more." You didn't lose them. They were pulled away, pulled by the hand of God, who said, "This one is not fit for where I'm taking you." And yes, it hurt. Yes, it broke your heart. But don't mistake the pruning for punishment. God was not trying to destroy you. He was preparing you. He was making room. He was clearing the field. He was positioning you to receive a blessing so powerful that no impure hand could touch it. No jealous spirit could contaminate it. And no false friend could sabotage it. You see, many of us ask God for blessings, but we're not willing to let go of the baggage. We want the promise, but we don't want the pruning. But God knows the weight of His blessing. And before He pours it out, He cleans the cup. Before He builds the palace, He clears the ground. And that clearing, it doesn't always feel good, but it's necessary. Because some people were hiding their envy behind support. Some were smiling in your face while planning your fall. Some were close only because they were feeding off your weakness, not contributing to your strength. But when God is about to move in your life, really move, He begins to shake everything. He exposes motives. He unveils intentions. He causes conversations to shift and atmospheres to change. And suddenly, those who once cheered for you begin to fade. Those who once praised you now criticized. Those who once called you family now call you a stranger. But don't cry over who left. Rejoice. Rejoice that God thought you worthy of elevation. Rejoice that your name reached heaven. Rejoice that God trusted you enough to say, "I am about to bless you. But first, I must remove them." Some of you have been asking, why did they betray me after all I did for them? Hear me clearly. You didn't do wrong by loving them, but God did right by removing them. He saw what you couldn't. He heard what they said when you weren't around. He witnessed the hidden intentions, the silent jealousy, the quiet contempt they carried in their heart while they pretended to clap for you. And so God in His mercy stepped in because your blessing was too big, your calling too holy, your destiny too sacred to be surrounded by the wrong company. And let me say this, when God removes, He also replaces. When He takes away, He always brings better. But you must be willing to let go of what was to receive what is to come. Stop trying to resurrect relationships God buried. Stop trying to mend what God dismantled. Stop opening doors God closed, because every person who left you created space for someone sent by God. Every voice that went silent made room for divine instruction. Every exit, every goodbye, every betrayal, it all had purpose. God never subtracts unless He's about to multiply. Sometimes the worst pain is not physical but emotional. The betrayal of a friend, the abandonment of a loved one, the silence of someone who promised to always be there. And in those moments, the devil whispers, "You're not loved, you're not valued, you're alone." But hear this loud and clear, you were never alone. God was with you through every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of confusion. And when they walked out, God walked in. When they said goodbye, God said, "Now watch what I'm about to do." You see, blessings require a certain atmosphere, a certain level of purity, a sanctified environment. God cannot bless you fully while you're surrounded by snakes. He cannot elevate you while you're attached to anchors. So He cuts, He separates, He uproots, and we mourn the loss. But heaven celebrates the clearance, because the blessing coming over your life is so massive, so undeniable, so heaven-ordained that only the right hearts can handle it. That God is about to open doors that no man can shut. He is about to release favor that generations before you never tasted. But first, He had to clean house. You thought it was a breakup. It was a breakthrough. You thought it was rejection. It was redirection. You thought you were being punished. No, beloved, you were being positioned. And God in His perfect knowledge said, "I must remove them before I release this." Because if they stayed, they would have tried to claim credit for your miracle. If they stayed, they would have sown seeds of doubt in your moment of faith. If they stayed, they would have clapped with one hand and cursed with the other. And God will not share His glory. When He blesses you, He makes sure everyone knows it was Him. Not them, not the crowd, not the helper, but Him. And so He clears the room. He empties the space so that when the blessing lands, no one can say, "I did that." Only God. But here's the challenge. Can you trust God when He subtracts? Can you praise Him when the circle gets smaller? Can you walk in faith when the road gets lonelier? Because that's where your power is. That's where the real shift happens. Not when you're surrounded by applause, but when you're alone in the quiet, trusting that God is still working, still speaking, still moving. And He is. Even when you don't feel it, even when the silence is deafening, God is orchestrating something unseen and unstoppable in your favor. There are moments when God will strip everything, friends, opportunities, plans, comforts, not to harm you, but to humble you, to remind you that your blessing is not in the hands of people, but in the hands of God alone. And once you realize that, once you grasp that God is your source, not people, Then and only then are you ready for what He's about to release. You may be misunderstood, misjudged, misused, but you're not misplaced. You are in the center of God's will, and the pain you feel now will soon make sense. You will look back on this season and say, "Thank God they left. Thank God He removed them. Thank God I didn't settle, because what God gave me is beyond anything I imagine." And I speak this into your spirit today. The blessing is coming. It is coming faster than you think. It is coming stronger than you expect. And when it comes, it will overtake you. But you must be ready. Don't look back. Don't chase what left. Don't beg for what God removed. Stand still, be faithful, and watch God work. There's a reason the wheat is separated from the chaff. A reason the gold is purified by fire. A reason the tree must be pruned to bear more fruit. God is preparing you for abundance. And anything or anyone not rooted in truth cannot come. God is not being cruel. He is being careful. Careful with your heart. Careful with your destiny. Careful with your future. Because the blessing He has for you is sacred, and sacred things require sanctified surroundings. So yes, it hurt. Yes, it confused you. But trust the hand behind the removal, because the same hand that closed the door will open a new one, a better one overflowing with purpose, peace, provision, and power. And when it opens, you will no longer question why they left. You will thank God that they did. You are not being punished. You are being protected. You are not being abandoned. You are being advanced. God has seen your tears. He has heard your prayers. And now He is acting, removing, replacing, restoring, releasing all, so you can walk into what He ordained before you were even born. There is power in your pain. There is purpose in your loss. There is victory in your valley. And God is not done with you. What He's about to do will silence every doubter, humble every hater, and restore everything the enemy tried to steal. But He had to clean the stage before the performance. He had to empty the table before the feast. He had to remove them before you were blessed. Hold your head high, dry your tears, lift your hands, and give glory to the One who sees what you cannot. Trust the process, trust the pruning, trust the removal, because your blessing is closer than it's ever been. And the absence you feel now is the greatest evidence that God is working behind the scenes. When God removes someone, it's never by accident. He doesn't operate in confusion. He doesn't make mistakes. Every exit is calculated. Every detachment is directed. And every loss is laced with love. Because God knows what you need and what you don't, who is for you and who is against you. And when your name is being written on blessings that eyes haven't seen and ears haven't heard, He ensures that no unclean spirit gets close. Now, as your spirit begins to awaken to this divine truth, let this echo deep within your soul. God's removals are a sign of your preparation, not your punishment. God does not tear away to harm, He removes to refine. He does not subtract to break you down. He subtracts to build you up in strength, in clarity, and in obedience. And when He sees that your heart has remained faithful, even in confusion, even in betrayal, even in silence, then He pours out what no eye has seen and no heart has imagined. There are seasons in life when you will walk through silence so thick it will feel like the heavens have closed. People you trusted will disappear. Connections you nurtured will wither. The applause will cease. And all that will remain is you and God. But let me tell you something. When it is only you and God, you have all you need. Because God alone is the source of strength, the wellspring of wisdom, the shield in battle and the voice that never lies. Sometimes God removes people not because they were evil, but because they were limited. They could only walk with you to a certain altitude. They couldn't handle the spiritual pressure of your next level. The air gets thinner at the top. The calling gets heavier. The vision gets sharper, and the path becomes narrower. God removes them because the blessing requires isolation. The anointing demands consecration, and your next season will not tolerate lukewarm faith, divided loyalty, or shallow commitment. Do not think for a moment that God has forgotten you. That's the lie the enemy wants you to believe. The truth is, God is setting the stage in silence. He is working while you're weeping. He is building while you're breaking. He is lifting while you're learning. Because the blessing that is coming requires a level of character, discipline, and maturity that only solitude can produce. There is a sacredness and separation. God speaks clearest when the noise is gone. He trains you when the crowd is absent. He corrects you when there's no one to flatter you. And if you truly desire His blessing, you must embrace His process. If you want the crown, you must endure the crushing. If you want the overflow, you must first withstand the drought. Too many are trying to carry into their blessing the weight of relationships that are no longer part of God's will. But when God says it's over, it's over. Let them go. Do not resurrect what God buried. Do not romanticize what God removed. Some people were only sent for the storm, not for the harvest. They came to teach you, not stay with you. They were a chapter, not your conclusion. God is not only a builder, He is a protector. He removes access when there's a threat to your purpose. He closes doors when betrayal is hiding on the other side. He shuts down paths when deception waits ahead. And though we may question the timing, the truth is, God sees the full picture. He knows what lies 5 steps ahead, while we only see the next footstep. So trust Him, not your emotions. Trust Him, not your attach. Trust Him, not your need for validation. Many blessings have been delayed, not because you weren't ready, but because you were still holding on to people who were unqualified to witness your miracle. And God in His mercy said, I must protect the integrity of this promise. I must separate you before I elevate you, because your blessing is not entertainment. It is divine equipment for your calling, and God cannot afford for it to be contaminated by unclean motives, fake smiles, or selfish ambition. You are not weak for letting go. You are wise. You are not cruel for creating distance. You are consecrated. When God speaks, obedience is the only right response. And when He removes, surrender is the only path to peace. Because resisting God's pruning will only prolong your wilderness, but submission brings you closer to your promised land. Think about this. Every great elevation in Scripture came after separation. The moment of testing always precedes the moment of triumph. The blessing never came without the cleansing. And that's what you're in right now. A cleansing, a clearing, a divine reset. And it's not punishment. It's preparation. God is saying, I am about to open doors you've never dreamed of. I am about to shift the atmosphere in your favor. But first, I must remove every soul that would poison the promise. Some of you are standing on the edge of your greatest breakthrough. You can feel it. The wind has changed. The season has shifted. The weight is lifting. But don't look for the old faces in your new season. Don't expect familiar voices to echo in this next chapter. God is doing a new thing with new people in a new way. And when He blesses you, and He will, those who left will wonder how you made it. Those who doubted you will witness your deliverance. Those who mocked your silence will be stunned by your success. But you won't need to explain. You won't need to justify. Your fruit will speak for itself. Your peace will testify. Your elevation will be your answer. Let your heart rest in this. God has not removed them to leave you empty. He has removed them to fill you with something far greater. Where there was betrayal, He will plant loyalty. Where there was manipulation, He will pour wisdom. Where there was heartbreak, He will sow joy. And where there was emptiness, He will overflow. But don't rush the process. Don't try to fill the gaps with your own plans. Wait. Wait in trust. Wait in hope. Wait in obedience. Because what God is about to place in your hands will make every sleepless night, every lonely tear, every silent prayer worth it. He is not a man that He should lie, and if He removes someone, it's because they could not carry the weight of the blessing you are about to receive. And now listen closely, because this truth must burn deep into your heart. God's removals are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your release. When God removes someone from your life, it's not to wound you, it's to wake you up. Wake you up from depending on man more than on God. Wake you up from chasing approval that was never meant to sustain you. Wake you up to the reality that God alone is your sustainer, your provider, your defender, your companion, your protector, and your reward. There are seasons when God must isolate before He elevates, not to punish, but to purify. God is not interested in surface-level success. He's not moved by outward appearances. He is moved by the condition of the heart. So when God sees that your heart is about to be entangled with people or relationships that will distort your focus, He intervenes. He cuts ties to preserve your truth. He removes attachments that could compromise your soul. That's not cruelty. That is the highest form of mercy. God would rather see you cry for a moment than be destroyed forever. Some people were never meant to walk with you into the land of blessing. They were assigned to your journey to teach you, test you, or sharpen you, but not to stay. And when their role is complete, God removes them swiftly and without negotiation. Because where you are going, there is no room for divided loyalty, no room for emotional parasites, no space for spiritual leeches. God will not bless you with a heavy crown only to see it fall off under the weight of unworthy company. And when God clears a space, don't fill it with substitutes. Do not rush into new alliances to numb the ache of absence. Every space God clears is a sacred space. It is a space of purpose. Let Him fill it. Let Him order the replacement. Because when God chooses who walks with you, they will walk in alignment with your calling, not against it. They will water your spirit, not drain it. They will lift your arms, not bind your wings. Some of you are still wounded because you tried to drag people into seasons they had no grace to survive. You carried them out of loyalty, but it cost you your peace. You kept them near out of history, but it robbed you of destiny. And God, who is rich in mercy, said enough. He saw you giving love where there was no honor, trust where there was no truth, time where there was no growth. And so He stepped in, not to take from you, but to give you a future uncontaminated by counterfeit connections. It's time to see the removal not as a curse, but as a cleansing. God was cleaning your atmosphere. He was purging the surroundings. He was silencing every voice that whispered doubt when He was speaking faith. Because your next chapter demands clarity, and clarity cannot come with confusion walking beside you. Some of you are stepping into positions of influence, decisions of legacy, seasons of destiny. And God had to make sure that no double-minded person had access to the game. The truth is, not everyone can handle the blessing God is about to release over your life. They see your potential, but they don't honor your process. They want your oil, but they don't respect your altar. And God, being the righteous judge and the loving caretaker of your soul, knows how to separate the wheat from the chaff. Don't mourn what left. It couldn't stay. It wasn't built to endure the glory coming your way. You must understand your blessing is holy. It has been preserved, fought for, protected by God Himself. And it will only land in a life that is ready, obedient, and aligned. That's why the shaking had to come. That's why the separation felt so sudden, because your destiny was on the line. And God is not casual with the destiny of those who trust Him. He uproots what you were too afraid to confront. He ends what you were too loyal to release. He tears down what you were too distracted to see was already falling apart. Let this be the moment where you stop looking backward and start praising forward. Stop replaying conversations and start reciting the promises of God. Stop mourning the exit and start preparing for the entrance. Because God is about to fill the space. The same space where betrayal lived, peace is about to reign. The same place where confusion once dwelled, wisdom is about to flow. The same emotional room where pain used to sit, joy will take up residence. You are not forsaken. You are being formed. You are not abandoned. You are being anointed. You are not broken. You are being built. This separation, this cutting away, this divine pruning, it was not by accident. It was urgent because the hour of your blessing is drawing close. You are nearer now than you have ever been. And when that door swings open, and it will, you will step through unburdened, free, clear-minded, with a heart no longer attached to what God never meant to remain. There comes a sacred turning point in every walk of faith where you realize the loss was never about what left. It was always about what God was preparing to release. When the pruning finally makes sense, not to your flesh, but to your spirit. When your tears have ceased, your vision sharpens, and you suddenly see that what felt like breaking was actually shaping you for readiness, ready for the doors that had been hidden from view, ready for the favor your character had not yet grown to carry, ready for a blessing so great that without God first removing the distractions, you would not have had the strength to hold it. This is not the moment to mourn those who left. This is not the season to doubt God's will. This is the moment to stand in faith and declare that every removal was ordered by the one who sees the end from the beginning. God, in His perfect understanding, does not guess. He decides. He does not hope. It happens. And when God makes a move, it is not to hurt you. It is to prepare the room where your next miracle will reside. You must understand the timing of God is perfect, never late, never early. And when God says someone's season in your life is over, He doesn't consult your emotions. He doesn't wait for your approval. He doesn't ask if you're ready. Because obedience is not about comfort, it's about trust. God removes what you think you need to make space for what you truly need. And oftentimes that sacred removal feels like abandonment, but in truth, it is divine acceleration. If God hadn't closed that door, you would still be knocking. If God hadn't severed that tie, you would still be entangled. If God hadn't removed their presence, you would still be mistaking proximity for purpose. But God steps in, not just to rearrange your surroundings, but to align your spirit with what is holy, what is right, and what is true. God never removes without purpose. His silence is not absence. His stillness is not inactivity. Even when your world feels pause, God is always moving. The people who left didn't delay your destiny. They cleared the way for it. The betrayals that stung your heart didn't weaken your future. They protected it. Because not every battle is meant to be fought. Some are meant to be avoided. And God, in His mercy, will remove the fight before it ever reaches you. You may never know the conversations He shielded you from, the lies He exposed before they took root, the traps that were set but never triggered because God intervened. That's the kind of God you serve. Not just a God who provides, but a God who prevents. Not just a God who builds, but a God who blocks. God who will block your own plans because He sees how small they are compared to what He has designed. And sometimes in your prayers you cry out, why didn't that relationship work? Why did that opportunity slip away? Why did that person I trusted betray me? But if you could only see with spiritual eyes, you would realize God was saying, I'm not letting this stand in the way of what's coming next. There are times when protection looks like pain. When God allows your heart to break so your pride can be dismantled. When He removes people who gave you comfort so that you learn to lean on Him entirely, not halfway, not when it's convenient, fully, constantly, desperately. Because your blessing doesn't come from man. It doesn't come from approval, connection, or applause. It comes from God alone. This is why God must purify your dependence. You cannot serve two sources. You cannot worship the blessing and the blesser. You cannot trust the vessel more than the one who fills it. So God strips everything that competes for His place in your heart. And yes, it feels lonely. Yes, it feels unfair. But it is holy, holy isolation that makes room for holy increase. Holy stillness that makes space for sacred instruction. God removes what was loud so you can finally hear His whisper. And what He is whispering now is this: what I have for you is not behind you, it is before you. What I am about to do will make you forget what you lost. I am not recycling your past, I am releasing your purpose. You are not empty, you are being positioned. You are not left behind, you are being moved to the front. And everything that looked like a loss is going to be the very soil where your increase begins to grow. Do not fear the emptiness. Emptiness is often the birthplace of greatness. When everything else is stripped away, that is when faith becomes real. That is when your voice begins to cry out, not from emotion, but from conviction. That is when you stop pretending and start depending. And God is not deaf to your dependence. He is not blind to your burden. He sees, He knows, and He will answer. The deeper the removal, the greater the revival. God is reviving your strength. He is renewing your spirit. He is resetting your direction. And when the blessing arrives, it will come with such force, such clarity, and such abundance that you will say, had they stayed, I would have missed this. Had I held on, I would have forfeited this. Had I resisted God's hand, I would have walked right past the very thing I was praying for. And hear this. What God is preparing is not just for you, it is also for those who will be blessed through you. Your obedience will overflow. Your healing will be a testimony. Your breakthrough will be a bridge for others to cross. That's why the purification had to be personal, because what's on you will affect what flows through you. And God doesn't want contaminated blessing. He wants pure rivers of purpose flowing from a heart that trusts Him fully. And now I say to you, stand still and see what God is doing. Even when it looks like everything is falling apart, do not measure the movement of God by the comfort of your current situation. God's hand is strongest when it seems the quietest. What looks like rejection is often redirection. What feels like abandonment is often advancement. And what appears as the loss of man is the gain of God. Because when God removes someone, it is not because your life is being diminished, it is because your purpose is being preserved. There is a sacredness to separation, a divine mystery in every detachment that God allows. We, in our limited understanding, often weep over what left us, while heaven rejoices over what was lifted from us. We pray to hold on, and God in His mercy says no, because holding on would hinder and clinging would corrupt. God knows that not everyone who starts with you can finish with you. Some were scaffolding only meant to hold you up while you were being built. But once the structure is strong, the scaffolding must come down. You may not understand it yet. You may still be walking through the ashes of what was, asking why it had to end this way. But I declare this to your soul. God is not a God of disorder. He is a God of alignment. And in His divine alignment, He shifts people like pieces on a board. Not to harm you, but to position you for something far greater than you could have planned for yourself. Sometimes the greatest act of love from God is when He says, I love you too much to let them stay. Because if they stayed, they would weaken your resolve. If they stayed, they would distract your devotion. If they stayed, they would pull your heart away from what truly matters. So God steps in and He removes, not as a thief in the night, but as a master architect, clearing the clutter to build something greater. Not all removals are losses. Some are upgrades disguised as heartbreak. God sees further than your eyes can see. He sees the end from the beginning. You may see a friend, God sees a betrayer. You may see a supporter, God sees a hidden enemy. You may see a partner, God sees a stumbling block. So when He says enough, when He says no more, you must trust His decision above your desire. Because the pain of temporary loss is nothing compared to the danger of long-term misalignment. You were created for divine purpose. You were not placed on this earth to fit into every room or to be accepted by every crowd. Some removals were necessary because they were draining your vision, diluting your calling, and distracting your spirit. God needed to separate you so He could strengthen you. He needed to isolate you so He could instruct you. He needed to take you into the wilderness so He could speak to you without interference. Many of you have been wondering why the circle got smaller, why the phone stopped ringing, why the people who once praised you have now grown cold. But I tell you today, it's because God is purifying your environment. The blessing He's about to release cannot survive in contaminated spaces. It cannot be shared with those who would mishandle it. It cannot be given where honor is absent. So God made the decision to clean the space before He filled it. There are some levels of peace, wisdom, and elevation that only come when you release your grip on what God already let go. The longer you hold on to expired people, the more you delay what is divinely assigned. You cannot pour fresh oil into an old wineskin, and you cannot carry the blessing of tomorrow while dragging the broken pieces of yesterday. Release it. Let it go. Trust the hand that removed them. You see, this is a season not just of healing, but of preparation for glory. What God has planned for your life is not average. It is not small. It is not ordinary. It is marked, purified, sanctified, and sealed for an appointed time. And anything that threatens to interfere with the weight of that blessing must be stripped away. That's why the separation felt sudden. That's why the change was abrupt, because God is not negotiating with your destiny. He is protecting it. You don't need to explain yourself to those who left. You don't need to beg for closure or chase after what fell apart. God has already spoken, and His word is final. When He removes, He redeems. When He subtracts, He multiplies. When He breaks, it is only to build better. You don't need to mourn what God has already replaced in the realm of the unseen. You just need to walk in faith until your eyes catch up with what your spirit already knows. This is holy ground. The silence you feel is not emptiness, it is preparation. The loneliness you sense is not rejection, it is sacred consecration. God is setting you apart, because the next doors that are about to open were not meant for the crowd, they were meant for you alone. And when you walk through them, you will not need validation, you will not need applause, you will only need the assurance that you followed God and not man. Let the removal mark a turning point, not a place of pity, but a place of power, not a pit, but a platform, because God is lifting you out of every place that hindered you and into every place that was promised to you. And when you look back, it won't be with bitterness, but with praise, saying, if God had not removed them, I would have missed what was mine. There is still more to come. The blessing has not been delayed. It's being perfected. And when it arrives, it will not come with confusion. It will come with clarity. It will not arrive in fragments. It will arrive in fullness. But only when you are willing to stand in agreement with God's decision, even when it wounds your flesh, because your spirit knows it was necessary. God removed them not because He wanted you to suffer, but because He wanted you to soar. And now you're finally ready to fly. And now hear this. With all the weight your soul can carry, when God removes, it's never without a revelation waiting behind the veil. You may not understand it when the ties are severed, when the voices go silent, when the path gets lonelier. But that's the very soil where spiritual clarity begins to bloom. It's in the tearing the truth is revealed. It's in the letting go that vision is sharpened. And it is in the separation that God finally has your undivided attention. You were never meant to blend in with everyone. You were never assigned to please the masses. There is something specific, something sacred, something set apart on your life. And that calling carries a weight that not every person is equipped to walk beside. God is not interested in popularity. He is interested in purity. And when the crowd around you begins to shrink, don't panic. Don't beg them to stay. Don't grieve over what had to be removed, because God reduces before He releases. He cuts back so that fruit may multiply. He trims branches so strength may flow to the root. There is a cleansing that must take place before glory can settle, a sanctification of your surroundings, a pruning of your partnerships, because God will not pour oil into a cracked vessel. He will not pour rivers into deserts you refuse to let go of. And He will not rain blessings on a foundation that still entertains distractions. Removal was never about who left you. It was always about who God is forming you to become. Let your spirit rise with this unshakable truth. What God removes, He replaces with something that matches your destiny, not your history. The people who walked with the old you may not have the capacity for the person God is turning you into. You're not going backward, you're being elevated. And elevation demands transformation. The same mind that clung to comfort will never hold the keys to the next door God is unlocking. So let God rewire your thinking. Let Him refine your prayers. Let Him reshape your priorities. His next move is not about where you've been, it's about where God is leading you. And that means some voices must go silent so you can hear the whisper of divine direction. Some doors must stay closed so that your eyes stop wandering. Some people must leave so that your heart returns fully to God and God alone. Because you can't receive your next assignment if you're still grieving your last attachment. The blessing that's coming is not ordinary, it's not familiar, it's not a recycled version of your past. It's fresh, it's divine, it's tailor-made for the soul that has been stretched, for the spirit that has been broken, for the heart that has remained faithful, even when surrounded by loss. And God will not let this blessing be shared with those who doubted the process, disrespected your journey, or despised the gift He placed in you. He'll remove them, because He is about to reveal what only faith can access. So don't be afraid of the empty spaces. God often does His greatest work in the gaps. The silence you feel is not abandonment, it is alignment. God is aligning your life with truth, with peace, with purpose. And sometimes the loudest move from God is the one He makes in secret. You won't always see the shift happening, but suddenly you'll wake up and realize the weight has lifted, the burden is gone, and your heart is free. That is the power of divine removal. It frees you for what is holy. You must come to the place where you stop asking, "Why did they leave?" and start asking God, "What are you making room for?" Because it's not just about what was lost, it's about what's coming. And what's coming will not be small. It will not be subtle. It will not be stolen. It will arrive with evidence, with power, with unmistakable favor. But only a surrendered soul will be able to carry it. Let this moment awaken your discernment. Not every exit is a threat. Some exits are gifts. Some farewells are holy because God knows what you need better than you do. You may have been trying to save what God was trying to sever. You may have been holding on out of loyalty, out of history, out of fear. But God in His love pulled it away before it could poison what He planted inside you. You see, God doesn't just want to bless you, He wants to protect the blessing within you. And protection sometimes looks like subtraction. It sometimes comes in the form of isolation. It sometimes hurts before it heals. But in the end, you will look back and say, "God, I thank you. I thank you for every no. I thank you for every closed door. I thank you for every person you removed, because if you hadn't, I would have settled for less than what you prepared." You're not being punished, you're being purified. You're not being forgotten, you're being fortified. And this process, though painful, is perfect in the hands of the one who formed you. Trust the breaking, trust the silence, trust the exit, because when God takes, He only does so to give what is better, what is fuller, what is eternal. This is a holy season, a season of divine shift, a season where your soul must choose to release the past and embrace the promise. Not with doubt, not with hesitation, but with bold, relentless trust. Because God has not brought you this far to leave you loved. He has not removed what you loved to leave you with emptiness. He has cleared the way so that you can walk into what eyes have not seen, what ears have not heard, and what your heart is only beginning to believe. So now stand firm. Let your heart rest. Let your soul breathe. Because the removal was not the end. It was the unveiling of your beginning. God, in His infinite wisdom, saw what you couldn't see, knew what you didn't know, and stepped in, not to destroy you, but to deliver you. To deliver you from unseen harm, from silent sabotage, from hidden traps that your heart was too loyal to detect. This is not the season to mourn. This is the moment to rise. Rise with courage. Rise with vision. Rise with purpose. Every farewell is a reminder that God is still unfolding your story. Every door that shuts is proof that He is still leading your steps. Every night you've spent in solitude is evidence that He has never left your side. People may disappoint you, walk away without reason, or change without warning, but God's faithfulness does not waver. The very hand that took something away is the same hand that will bring restoration. The same voice that whispered, "Release them," is now declaring, "Prepare yourself, for what is coming will not be withheld, denied, or diminished. It will come in completeness, in peace, and in divine strength. When it does, you will see that every loss was His protection. Every silence was His preparation. Every goodbye was the mercy of God. So lift up your head, dry your tears, and let your spirit be renewed, because the next chapter is not defined by what slipped away. It is defined by what God is about to unveil. And when it is unveiled, you will finally understand why they could not stay. God removed them so His blessing could reach you now. What does it really mean to hand everything over to God? Not just with words, not just in a desperate moment, but wholly, from the deepest core of your heart. I'm not describing half-hearted obedience. I'm not referring to shallow faith that collapses when the pressure comes. I'm speaking of what unfolds when a soul releases control, lets go of pride, and bows low before God in complete surrender. That instant marks the start of something fierce, something transformative enough to shift the entire course of your life. It shakes the ground of fear. It dismantles anxiety. It breaks chains you didn't even know had tightened around your spirit. When you give yourself fully to God, you don't lose your identity. You discover it for the very first time. People wander through this life weighed down by burdens they were never meant to hold. They strive in their own strength, fight wars they cannot win, chase after affirmation in a world that only leaves them hollow. But there always comes a moment in every chosen life when God whispers the call to surrender. Not because God wants to take something from them, but because God wants to give them something greater. That surrender is the key that unlocks destiny. It's not weakness. It is the highest act of strength. It is the declaration that you trust God more than your circumstances, more than your thoughts, more than your fears. When you truly surrender to God, you begin to live a different kind of life. Your decisions are no longer based on your emotions. They are anchored in divine instruction. You stop running after people who don't value you. You stop fighting battles that are not yours to fight. You stop chasing approval and begin walking in divine alignment. There's a stillness that comes, not the stillness of laziness, but the stillness of power. The kind of stillness that says, I know my God is in control, and I no longer have to panic. God doesn't ask for surrender because He wants to control you. God asks for surrender because He wants to bless you. The problem is, too many people try to hold on to both the world and God. They want to lean on their own understanding but still expect divine guidance. They want God's peace but not God's process. You cannot have both. You cannot walk with one foot in the kingdom and one foot in chaos. When you fully surrender to God, you walk away from confusion. You walk away from spiritual double-mindedness. You begin to see clearly. You begin to hear instructions that others miss.
God speaks to the surrendered soul with clarity and power.
There is a reason why the most powerful people of God were also the most surrendered. Not because they were smarter, not because they were stronger, but because they dared to let go. Because they dared to say, God, I trust you even when I don't understand. I follow you even when the road ahead is dark. I obey you even when my flesh wants to rebel. That kind of obedience moves the hand of God. That kind of surrender will position you in rooms you never imagined. It will protect you from traps you never saw. It will elevate you without you having to strive or manipulate or beg. Because what God gives to the surrendered, no one can take away. When you surrender to God, you no longer make decisions based on fear. You stop calculating every move like a person who has no divine covering. You stop relying on what makes sense to your limited mind. Instead, you begin to walk in the wisdom of the one who sees the end from the beginning. That changes everything. You may not understand why God is leading you the long way. You may not understand why doors are closing. But the surrendered heart says, if God said no, it was a gift. If God delayed it, it was protection. If God removed it, it was poison. This kind of thinking doesn't come from the world, it comes from total trust.
You see, the surrendered person is not easily shaken.
Storms will still come, but they will not break you. People will still betray you, but they will not destroy you. The devil will still attack, but he will not defeat you. Why? Because you are not fighting for yourself anymore. God is fighting for you. You are not running your life anymore. God is. You are not trying to prove yourself. God already knows who you are. That is the power of surrender. Let me tell you something that the world doesn't understand. The greatest strength is not in control, but in release. The greatest victory is not in resistance, but in surrender. When you let go of your will and embrace God's will, you become unstoppable. Not because of who you are, but because of whose hand you're walking in. The surrendered life is not free from pain, but it is full of purpose. It is not free from tears, but it is anchored in peace. It is not without enemies, but it is surrounded by protection. When you surrender to God, He begins to reorder your steps. Things you used to tolerate begin to irritate your spirit. You begin to see the difference between what is good and what is God. You stop being impressed with flashy opportunities and start being drawn to divine assignments. You no longer move because of pressure, you move because of instruction. You no longer seek comfort, you seek obedience. And that is when real transformation begins. Surrender brings clarity. It removes confusion. It silences voices that once overwhelmed you. It aligns your heart with God's timing. You no longer rush ahead, you wait. You no longer manipulate outcomes, you trust. And in that waiting, in that trusting, in that divine patience, God begins to unfold blessings that you were not ready for before. Some doors are delayed not because God is punishing you, but because you were not surrendered enough to handle what was behind them. But when you fully surrender, God knows you can be trusted with more. God knows your hands are clean. God knows your motives are pure. God knows you are not chasing the blessing, you are chasing the blesser. There is peace in surrender. Not a temporary calm, but a peace that surpasses all understanding. A peace that lets you sleep in the storm. A peace that lets you smile in the valley. A peace that says, my life is not in my hands. My future is not in man's hands. My soul belongs to God. That peace cannot be faked. It cannot be bought. It only comes from a life that has truly bowed in surrender. And let me tell you, the surrendered life will be tested. People will misunderstand your peace. They will think you're weak because you don't retaliate. They will think you're foolish because you don't chase what they chase. But they don't know the power behind your silence. They don't know the strength behind your stillness. They don't know the fire burning in your soul. Because when you surrender to God, you no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to defend your name. God becomes your defender. God becomes your witness. God becomes your reward. The world teaches self-reliance. The world says, make it happen. God says, be still and know that I am God. The world says, push harder. God says, wait on me. The world says, control everything. God says, release it to me. And you have to choose. Will you follow the noise of the world or the whisper of God? Because you cannot serve both. You cannot surrender halfway. God doesn't bless halfway obedience. God honors total surrender. And if you surrender fully, you may honor the total surrender. Some of you are tired, not because you're weak, but because you're trying to carry things God told you to release. You're trying to fix what only God can heal. You're trying to change people God told you to walk away from. You're trying to open doors that God locked for your protection. And until you surrender, you will keep wearing yourself out. Until you say, God, not my will but yours, you will keep feeling stuck. But the moment you surrender, things begin to shift. The weight lifts. The path clears. The noise stops, because God is not waiting on your perfection. God is waiting on your surrender. God doesn't need your plans. God needs your permission. Permission to lead you, permission to correct you, permission to guide you in ways that may not make sense to the world. But if you give Him that permission, if you lay down your agenda and pick up His, you will see things you've never seen. You will go places you never imagined. You will walk in favor that doesn't match your resume. You will receive protection that confuses your enemies. You will experience provision that comes out of nowhere, because God takes care of those who surrender fully. When you surrender, you stop striving and start abiding. You stop performing and start trusting. You stop panicking and start resting. And it's not because life gets easier, it's because you've handed the reins to the one who cannot fail. You've given control to the one who sees what you cannot see. You've submitted to the will of the one who created your purpose before you were even born. That kind of surrender is not loss, it is gain. That kind of surrender is not weakness, it is wisdom. That kind of surrender doesn't make you smaller, it prepares you for something greater. But let me be clear, surrender is not a one-time event. It is a daily choice. Every morning, you must choose to say, God, I trust you again. I release control again. I choose your way over mine again. And every time you make that choice, something inside of you grows stronger. Your discernment sharpens. Your character deepens. Your peace expands, and your connection with God becomes unshakable. When a person truly surrenders to God, everything begins to align not with their preferences, but with their purpose. The surrendered soul doesn't chase outcomes, it obeys instructions. And in that obedience, something begins to awaken inside. A holy fire, a divine clarity, a boldness that cannot be explained by intellect or logic. It is the kind of boldness that only comes from walking in step with the will of God. It is not arrogance. It is authority divinely given, divinely sustained. God does not pour His wisdom into vessels that are already full of their own opinions. God waits until a soul is empty of self, empty of pride, empty of rebellion. Then and only then does God fill that vessel with something eternal, with insight, with power, with direction.
The surrendered life is not passive.
It is deeply alive, intensely focused, radically obedient. Because when you give up your plan for God's plan, you don't step into less, you step into more. More peace, more clarity, more power, more favor. That doesn't come from titles or positions, but from spiritual positioning.
And here is a truth many ignore.
Surrender doesn't make life easier, it makes you stronger. It doesn't remove every storm, but it builds within you a shelter that cannot be shaken. When you are surrendered, storms don't destroy you, they reveal you. They expose the depth of your trust in God. They test your foundation. And if you are rooted in surrender, you will not fall. The winds may roar, but your soul will stand steady, not because of who you are, but because of who holds you.
There are things God cannot reveal to a proud heart. There are doors that will not open until humility becomes your foundation. You can pray, fast, and speak all the right words, but if your heart is still trying to wrestle with the will of God, the heavens remain still. But when you break before God, not in defeat, but in reverence, when you lay your will down and say, God, even if it costs me comfort, even if it costs me relationships, even if it costs me recognition, I surrender. That is when things begin to shift. God never abandons the surrendered.
Others may turn their back. People may doubt your path. But when God sees your willingness to obey, no matter the cost, you gain access to a realm of divine intimacy and strength that the world cannot touch. Surrender turns pain into purpose. It turns delay into preparation. It turns confusion into divine instruction. And it turns ordinary people into vessels of extraordinary power, not by force, but by submission.
Many ask, why hasn't it happened yet? Why hasn't the breakthrough come?
But the real question is, have you truly surrendered? Not partially, not selectively, but fully. Have you laid down your fears? Have you released your timelines? Have you let go of your opinions of how things should unfold and set God your way alone? Because God does not bless what we hide. God blesses what we surrender. Until you put it on the altar, it cannot be transformed. Until you let it die in the hands of God, it cannot live in the light of purpose. Surrender requires trust, and trust is built through stillness. In the silence, in the unseen, in the unknown, God is building you, and you must trust that process. Surrender is not about understanding everything, it's about obeying even when you understand nothing. The mind may scream, "This doesn't make sense," but the Spirit whispers, "This is God's will." And when you follow that whisper, doors open that your intellect could never have unlocked.
The surrendered person stops reacting to the noise of light. They begin responding to the voice of God, and that changes everything. You begin to walk slower, speak with purpose, act with intention. You're no longer rushed by pressure or manipulated by emotion, because your decisions are no longer based on urgency, they're based on divine timing. God doesn't rush, and when you're surrendered, you don't either. You wait, not with frustration, but with faith. Surrender redefines your identity. You stop identifying with your past, your pain, your performance. You start identifying with purpose, with destiny, with the hand of God that has been guiding you through every valley, every battle, every silent night. Surrender removes the masks.
It strips away the false identities we wear to impress others. And what's left is something raw, real, and powerful. Your true self as God intended it. And that version of you, the surrendered version, becomes unstoppable. Not because of personal strength, but because it is God who carries you. Let me tell you, surrender is not for the faint of heart. It is the path of fire. It is the furnace where ego burns, where pride is shattered, where independence dies. But what rises from those ashes is something fierce, something immovable, a soul that walks with God without compromise, a spirit that cannot be manipulated because it no longer seeks approval from man, a heart that doesn't panic when rejected because it is accepted by God. That's the reward of surrender. Not applause, not fame, but divine intimacy, a closeness to God that no amount of success or status could ever replace. And with that closeness comes discernment. You begin to sense when something is off, even if it looks right. You begin to know when to speak and when to stay silent, when to move and when to wait.
God begins to whisper secrets to the surrendered, instructions that lead to open doors, warnings that keep you from traps, nudges that steer you around what could have destroyed you. This is not luck. This is not intuition. This is what happens when your spirit is in sync with the Creator. The surrendered life is full of power because it is empty of pride.
God does not pour new wine into old wineskins. You cannot carry the next level of purpose with the old level of thinking. Something must die so something greater can live. And that is the core of surrender. It is death to self, not physical death, but death to ego, death to rebellion, death to the illusion that you are in control. And when that death happens, resurrection follows. A new mindset, a new peace, a new vision. You begin to see not with the eyes of the flesh, but with the clarity of divine insight. When you surrender, you walk differently. You don't panic when plans fall apart. You don't collapse under rejection. You don't compromise to be accepted. Because your security doesn't come from the world, it comes from God. That's why surrendered people carry a certain calm. It's not apathy, it's assurance. They know that even when they don't understand, they are being led by the one who does. And that assurance is unshakable. And let me warn you, when you truly surrender, not everyone will celebrate it. Some will call you foolish. Some will distance themselves because your surrender will convict their comfort. Your obedience will expose their compromise. But don't retreat, don't explain, don't apologize for choosing the higher path. Because your life is not meant to blend in. It is meant to reflect the will of God. Surrender is not a retreat, it is a rise. It is not stepping back from life, it is stepping forward in divine authority. When you surrender to God, you are no longer reacting to the chaos of the world. You are responding to the wisdom of the heavens. You are no longer tossed by the waves of circumstances. You are anchored in the unwavering sovereignty of God. There is a kind of confidence that only comes from surrender. A confidence not based on outcomes, but on obedience. The confidence that says, even if I don't see the path, I know the one who directs my steps. This is not blind faith. This is enlightened trust. The kind of trust that is birthed through fire, through trial, through kneeling when your flesh wants to run. You see, surrender doesn't mean you understand everything God is doing. It means you trust that God is always doing what is right. It is the sacred act of laying down your timeline and embracing divine timing. And divine timing never fails. It may not operate on your schedule, but it always operates with perfect purpose. So many people live in frustration, not because God isn't moving, but because they haven't surrendered their need to control how and when God moves. But when you surrender, you stop demanding answers and start walking in alignment.
You stop praying why and you start declaring, let it be according to your will. There is a divine order to life that only the surrendered can access. God does not reveal the fullness of His plan to the proud, to the impatient, to the impulsive. God reveals the next step to the one who is still, who is attentive, who is humble enough to say, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. That's the language of surrender. That's the language of spiritual maturity. And that's the voice God responds to. The surrendered heart becomes a vessel. And a vessel doesn't dictate its use. It simply makes itself available. The surrendered don't argue with God's assignments. They don't delay obedience, waiting for comfort or convenience. They move quickly, quietly, obediently, because they know that partial obedience is disobedience, and delayed obedience is still rebellion. The surrendered don't need applause or confirmation from others. They have already received approval from the only one who mattered. That's why the surrendered are often misunderstood. They walk in a different rhythm. They live by a different code. They are not impressed by the superficial. They are not distracted by the temporary. They are locked in to eternity. When you truly yield your life to God, your appetite for what once drained you disappears. You no longer chase the approval of those who used to define your value. You stop reaching for rooms where you were merely endured, never celebrated. God will not allow surrendered hearts to remain trapped in circles that choke their calling. He will stir the atmosphere until you rise, until you step away, until you walk into the higher place of purpose. That is why surrender so often begins with separation, because God cannot unlock destiny while you're still knotted up in distraction. Surrender unmasks your idols. It reveals what you've been holding tighter than Him. Perhaps it's your carefully built plans. Perhaps it's a relationship. Perhaps it's your reputation, your image, that hunger to be noticed. Yet when you surrender, every one of those things comes into the light. Not so that God can condemn you, but so that He can free you. The pain you feel when surrender strips something from your life is not the pain of punishment, it is the pain of purification. And when you've been purified by surrender, nothing can defile what God has placed within you. You become sacred territory, a vessel of power, a carrier of divine fire. Let me tell you, when you surrender, God doesn't just change your life, God changes your spiritual DNA. You begin to see with different eyes, hear with different ears, speak with a different weight. Your words carry impact because they come from a place of obedience, not opinion. Your presence begins to shift atmospheres, not because you are aligned with the will of God. And when you are aligned with God, you don't chase influence. God gives you impact. You don't chase platforms. God builds them beneath your feet. But be warned, true surrender will cost you. It will cost your comfort. It will cost your pride. It will cost your desire to be understood by everyone. It may even cost relationships you thought were lifelong. But what you gain is greater. You gain clarity. You gain peace that cannot be shaken. You gain a spiritual boldness that causes you to walk into unfamiliar places without fear because you know God sent you there. That kind of boldness cannot be taught. It is forged in surrender. And when you live surrendered, you become dangerous to darkness. You are no longer bound by emotional traps. You are no longer easily deceived by flattery. You are no longer shaken by delay, denial, or detour, because you walk with the understanding that everything God does is intentional. Every no is protection. Every silence is instruction. Every delay is preparation. The surrendered do not crumble in the waiting. They grow. They mature. They develop the patience that holds their promotion because they know that what God is building in them is bigger than what they are walking through. The world teaches you to take control. God teaches you to let go. The world says, manifest your future. God says, submit to my will. The world says, follow your heart. God says, guard your heart and follow me. These are two different systems, two different kingdoms, and you must choose. You cannot serve both. The moment you choose to surrender to God, you will begin to see the cracks in the ways of the world. The lies that once seduced you will lose their power. The noise that once distracted you will become silent, because surrender turns down the volume of the world and tunes your soul to the frequency of God. That frequency is pure, it is steady, it is clear. God doesn't speak in chaos, He speaks in stillness. But only the surrendered are still enough to hear. Only the surrendered have ears sensitive enough to receive what others ignore. And in that stillness, God reveals strategy. God gives revelation. God downloads wisdom that can unlock generations. The surrendered become solutions in a world of confusion, not because they know more, but because they trust more, because they've been emptied of self and filled with divine instruction. When you surrender, your spirit becomes unpolluted. You no longer operate in fear disguised as caution. You no longer confuse overthinking with wisdom. You act when God says act, and you wait when God says wait. And in that rhythm of divine obedience, your life becomes fruitful without force. Doors open without begging. Help arrives without hustling. Peace flows without effort. Not because life becomes easy, but because you are no longer resisting God. Some of you are fighting battles that would end today if you would just surrender. Some of you are living in anxiety, not because you lack faith, but because you're still trying to control what God has asked you to release. But hear this, God doesn't need your control. God needs your cooperation. God doesn't need your perfection. God needs your submission. And when you finally get tired enough of doing things your own way, when your strength runs out, surrender won't feel like defeat. It will feel like relief. It will feel like peace in your bones, clarity in your mind, fire in your spirit. And suddenly, the chaos that used to shake you will pass by like wind through trees, because your roots will be deep. Not in ambition, not in your plan, but in God's presence. And what is rooted in God cannot be uprooted by man. When God becomes your foundation, surrender no longer feels like sacrifice. It becomes your sanctuary. It is the place where your soul finds rest. Not because the storm has ended, but because your heart has finally stopped wrestling. When you surrender to God, you stop living life on your own terms. You stop running from silence. You stop fearing the unknown. The surrendered soul learns to breathe deeply even in the dark, because it trusts the one who designed both the day and the night. It knows that even if God is silent, God is still working. Even if the path is hidden, God is still guiding. This is not passive waiting, it is powerful trust. Surrender is not about giving up your voice, it's about giving your voice to God. It's not about being weak, it's about being wise enough to recognize that your strength has limits, but God's strength does not. The world tells you to speak your truth, but the surrendered don't speak just to be heard. They speak when God says speak. They move when God says move. And they are silent when God says be still.
This kind of life requires discipline, sensitivity, and courage. It requires you to be less concerned with what people think and more consumed with what God desires.
There are things in your life right now that you've been trying to fix with effort, with logic, with strategy. But what if the solution isn't in doing more, but in letting go more? What if the breakthrough you're seeking is not on the other side of striving, but on the other side of surrender? You see, surrender is the doorway to supernatural solutions. It is the place where natural limitation meets divine intervention, where human effort ends and divine provision begins. God steps into surrendered places, not crowded places, not noisy places, but emptied, yielded, sanctified places. The surrendered life is not void of ambition. It is ambition purified by purpose. You don't lose your dreams, but your dreams become realigned. They serve God's kingdom. Your pursuit is no longer applause, it is assignment. You no longer run after status, you run after sanctity. God begins to trust you with influence, not because you crave it, but because you no longer need it to feel valid. When you surrender, you become a trustworthy steward. You no longer serve for recognition, you serve because it's your responsibility. You don't chase light, you become light. And it is in that quiet obedience that God begins to elevate, not by force, but by favor, not by striving, but by selection. And that selection is not about being better, it's about being available. God uses the available, not the arrogant, the yielded, not the loud, the ones who say, I don't need the spotlight, I just want to be where God wants me to be. That is where elevation begins. That is where legacy is born. In hidden obedience, in surrendered silence, in unseen loyalty to the will of God. There is a holiness that surrounds the surrendered. You can feel it when they enter a room, not because they try to impress, not because they speak eloquently, but because there's a weight on their words, a presence on their posture, an authority in their humility. They don't command attention, they command atmosphere. Because when you live a surrendered life, you carry the residue of God's presence wherever you go. Not for show, but for impact. You become a walking encounter, a living testimony of what happens when a soul bows low and allows God to rise high. And make no mistake, surrender is not without testing. God doesn't trust the unproven. Before promotion, there is always pruning. Before expansion, there is always isolation. Before release, there is always refinement. And the surrendered don't fight that process. They embrace it. They don't curse the fire. They thank God for the purification. They don't resist the silence. They lean in to listen more closely because they understand the fire is not punishment, it is preparation. And if God is allowing it, it is building something in you that comfort never could. Surrender repositions your pain. It doesn't remove the memory, but it removes the sting. It doesn't erase what happened, but it transforms how it shapes you. The surrender don't deny their past, they offer it to God. And in God's hands, pain becomes purpose. Scars become symbols of survival. Wounds become wells of wisdom. The surrendered carry their history without shame because they know God has offered their healing. In surrender, you learn the difference between discipline and delay. Sometimes God holds things back not to deny you, but to develop you. If God gave you everything you asked for right now, would your character be strong enough to carry it? Would your soul be grounded enough to survive it? Would your heart remain pure if the platform expanded? God sees what we don't. And surrender is saying, even when I think I'm ready, I trust that you know better.
So I'll wait. I'll serve. I'll grow. I'll obey. And when the time is right, God moves, not a second late, not a moment early, but precisely on schedule. And when God moves, no human hand can stop what He starts. When God opens a door for the surrendered, it doesn't creak open. It swings wide. When God makes a way, it's not temporary. It is established. And what God establishes, no enemy can undo. So what do you need to surrender today? Is it your plan, your timeline, your fear, your need to control outcomes, your unwillingness to let go of what no longer serves your growth? Whatever it is, God is not asking for it to punish you. God is asking for it to position you. What you release into God's hands multiplies. What you cling to in fear decays. Let it go. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because the version of you that God is calling forth cannot rise until the old you is laid down. This is the power of surrender. It is both an end and the beginning. It is the end of trying to be your own God, and the beginning of walking with the one who holds all things together. It is the end of anxiety-driven striving and the beginning of peace-infused purpose. It is the death of self-sufficiency and the birth of divine dependence. And from that dependence springs power, wisdom, clarity, and supernatural strength. The most dangerous people in the world are not those with money or status or popularity. The most dangerous people in the world are those who have fully surrendered to God because they cannot be bought, they cannot be intimidated, they cannot be distracted. They are led by something higher. They are anchored in something eternal. They are governed by the unshakable presence of God. And through them, God moves freely, powerfully, intentionally, and without obstruction. If you want to experience that kind of life, the answer is simple, but not easy. Surrender. Surrender again. Surrender deeper, not partially, not occasionally, but fully. Because the life you've been praying for is on the other side of the surrender you've been avoiding. And once you lay it all down, your fear, your pride, your plan, your past, God will raise you up. Not for your glory, not for your name, but so the world will know what it looks like when a soul gives God everything and receives everything it never even imagined in return. When you fully surrender to God, you stop surviving and start living. Your existence shifts from reaction to revelation. You are no longer driven by what the world throws at you. You are moved by what God places within you. You stop chasing everything outside of you because what you carry inside of you becomes greater than any external reward. That is the supernatural effect of surrender. It transforms your inner world so radically that the noise of the outer world can no longer control your peace. And peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of God ruling within you. Surrender is not silence. It is spiritual alignment. It is the daily decision to bring every thought, every fear, every desire under the authority of God. This is not a one-time emotional moment. This is a daily spiritual discipline, a sacred rhythm where your will bows low so God's will can rise higher. And every time you surrender, you clear the path for God to do what only God can do. Surrender says, God, even if I don't see the outcome, I will still walk the path. It says, even if I feel weak, I will still obey. It says, even if everything in me wants to run, I will remain where you planted me. That kind of surrender terrifies the enemy because it means you are no longer ruled by what you feel. You are ruled by what you know God has spoken. You see, God doesn't call the surrendered to comfort. He calls them to conquest. Not conquest in the way the world defines it, but spiritual dominion.
dominion over fear, dominion over confusion, dominion over generational cycles that have held your family hostage for years. God gives authority to the surrendered because they can be trusted not to abuse it. Power in the hands of the unbroken is dangerous, but in the hands of the surrendered, power becomes purpose. It becomes healing. It becomes restoration. That is why God waits. That is why the blessing is sometimes delayed, because God is watching to see if you want the promise more than the process, or if you are willing to die to self so that divine purpose can live in you. Surrender doesn't erase your identity, it refines it. It chisels away the false labels, the shallow layers, the ego, driven desires that culture has placed upon you. And what remains is something authentic, holy, and unstoppable. When you surrender to God, you are no longer defined by where you've been. You are redefined by where God is taking you. No past can limit a surrendered future. No failure can cancel a surrendered purpose. No, because God does not consult your history to determine your destiny. God looks at your posture, and if your heart is bowed low, God will lift you high. So many walk around asking for clarity, asking for direction, asking for purpose, but the key is surrender. God does not reveal vision to a heart that is already set on its own way. God reveals vision to the one who says, "Even if you change the course, I will follow." That is when doors open. That is when the fog lifts. That is when decisions become simple, not always easy, but clear. Because the surrendered are not guided by pressure or persuasion. They are guided by peace. And peace is the compass of the surrendered soul. Let me speak plainly. Surrender is not weakness. It is war. It is the war against your flesh, your fears, your stubbornness, your habits, your need to control. Surrender is a spiritual fight, and you must win it daily. Every time pride rises, surrender cuts it down. Every time fear whispers, surrender declares God is still in control. Every time doubt knocks, surrender answers with faith. This war is not fought with fists. It is fought on your knees, in your mind, in your decisions, in your silence, in your yes to God, when everything around you screams no. And as you grow in surrender, something beautiful happens. You become immune to the traps that once ensnared you. The praise of man no longer moves you. The criticism of others no longer breaks you. The urgency of the world no longer manipulates you, because your soul has found its anchor. And that anchor is God. And when your soul is anchored in God, you don't drift with every wave. You don't chase every trend. And you don't fear every storm. You walk with a quiet authority, a holy confidence, a peace that others cannot explain. The surrendered don't need to control outcomes because they trust the one who writes the outcome. They don't need to rush into decisions because they understand that anything forced is rarely from God. The surrender have the patience to wait, the courage to stay, the humility to serve, and the faith to obey. And that is what positions them for divine favor. Not because they demand it, but because they've been molded to carry it. You see, God is not just preparing the blessing for you. God is preparing you for the blessing. And sometimes that preparation feels like loss. It feels like rejection. It feels like isolation. But in God's eyes, it is purification. It is sanctification. It is spiritual elevation. And the more you surrender, the more you are refined. The more you are emptied of the world, the more you are filled with God, until one day your life becomes a living testimony, a light on a hill, a vessel of divine fire, burning not with ambition, but with assignment. To let go. Let go what they said.
Let go of who left. Let go of the timelines you created in your mind. Let go of the illusion of control. Because as long as your hands are full of what you think you need, they cannot be filled with what God wants to give. The surrendered life is a life of empty hands and a full heart. And in that emptiness, God pours in everything that matters: peace, wisdom, strength, purpose, and unshakable joy. Surrender is the highest form of worship. It says, I trust you more than I trust myself. It says, I believe you even when I don't see how it will work out. It says, your will is better than my plan. And when you live with that level of trust, God begins to do things in your life that no eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined, because you're not forcing it. You're moving with the current. You're not forcing anything. You're yielded. The world will label you strange. They'll claim you've lost your hunger, that you've abandoned ambition. But they can't measure what you've received. They can't witness the calm that lives inside you. They can't hear God's whisper in your stillness. They can't sense the flame of obedience burning within you. You haven't dulled your edge, you've honed it. You've faced God and refused to be dragged by anything else. So remain yielded. Remain hidden when God asks it of you. Remain small while God shapes you. Remain steadfast in the unseen places. For the same God who notices your secret surrender will honor you in ways the world cannot overlook. Not because you pursued it, but because you released it. And that, my friend, is the strength of a life fully given to God.